Hello YouTube, Matt here from Vectis 3D Models, here with another instruction video. This is for the Q1 tank engine kit. Now, as some of you may have already seen on this channel, I do like the unusual items that Bogie designed and possibly never ever built. This kit is based on a drawing that I have seen, and also one that I've also seen built into a live steam locomotive that has been used sort of on model engineering circuits. I've designed and created two types of conversion kit. You can see the one unbuilt in front of us here with the two tanks, just here, the support brackets for those tanks, and the bunker itself. Now, this bunker here has cut down ends or sides, which makes it look a little bit like a standard 4 or an ivet kind of bunker. This one here is the other design. This one has raised sides a bit like the tender on a Q1, so in keeping with the Q1 styling. Both kits will be available to order on mademe.co.uk. The link will be in the description and the price will be around about £30. Now, of course, you will need a Q1 or a donor Q1. Now, if you're interested in never was's or never built bullies, this and the Q1 Pacific will be available very soon. So if you buy a Q1, then you can at least donate the tender to the Q1 Pacific. That being said, this kit is probably an intermediate level for those who like to convert locomotives or models. So you will need some tools like a Dremel, a sander, some sort of sanding equipment just to clean the 3D print up, because they are rough when you buy them. You do need to clean them up. So if you are looking to build one and you're sort of interested but not too sure, please ask. That being said, we will crack on with the build and walk you through it as we go. So back on the inside workbench, as it's 1 degree outside, not very warm today. So we're going to have a look at the kit. We're going to check the kit pieces, tanks here, make sure they're okay. You've got some printing debris on the end there which needs to be cleaned off with a needle file. Surfaces look okay, all the rivets are there, and a little part on the back as well, rivets and the cover, and all that looks okay. If it's slightly bent, put it in some warm water and rebend it the other way, and rinse it in some cold. You'll need to probably clean off the back of here. You can see all the support debris still. Clean it off with a fiberglass pen or brush. Do that for both, they'll have the same problem. The supports here for the tanks, these are fitted a little bit later on, which you'll see. They probably just need a bit of cleaning up and a bit of painting. All this will be satin black anyway, but you should have two types of bracket. You should have one with a slightly larger pad on the back, and one with a slightly smaller one. The slightly smaller one goes towards the front of the loco, and the larger bracket on the back goes towards the back part of the locomotive, which you'll see later. On this build, we're going to use the cut down extension. You can see in the background the original one I've already built with the extended bunker, with the extended sides, trying to keep the Q1 style. This one is much more sort of looking a bit like a standard 4 or an ivet, because some drawings also showed that as well. So it's got a nice detailed interior as per the Q1. It's basically copied off the back of a Q1 tender, which took a while to do, but it looks quite good. You've got the holes for the handrails, and I'm going to leave it up to you what you want to do about this slider section. And as you can see here, I've left the filler caps in here. for the water. So the idea is this bunker, part of it is going to be a tank, and you can see the balance pipes to the front tanks as well. That's the idea anyway. So that's why there's no filler caps on the tanks, if somebody's going to ask and wonder. So you need to clean this off as well. You'll probably have quite a lot of debris around the back, you can see there. Again, one of these will be handy, and maybe some very fine sort of sandpaper will be good as well. But it does clean up quite nicely. Mind your fingers when you use this, you don't get any fibres stuck in your finger. I'm going to spend most of the evening pulling them out with a pair of tweezers. Now you can see there's holes down the bottom here. These are for the steps, and this part here is for the bogie. Now you'll need some parts as well, which I'll go into next, which are all from RT models, I think, off the top of my head, and some from Wizard models as well. So we'll go into that now, but before that you'll need obviously a Q1. This is a Hornby Q1. This is half of a Q1, didn't come with a tender. I found this on eBay for about 40 quid, 45 I think it was. So that was quite a good buy. It works, it runs, it's okay. It's just got quite a lot of weathering. But overall it's not in too bad a condition, and it can be recycled and reused. Now before we start, I'm just going to put it out there that when you do this work, there'll be some modification to the chassis to make it fit and to make the bogie wheels fit. I will be recycling bits and pieces, but not all of it. So once you do the changes, that's pretty much it. It won't be able to be turned back into a Q1 with a tender. So that's just a warning. Overall, that's what you need. You need one of these with no tender, or if you find a nice cheap one for about 50-55 with a tender, great. You can donate that to another project, which you'll find out in a couple of weeks what that might be. So let's crack on, and we'll move on to the parts you'll be needing. So taking a look at the parts required for this kit, you'll have to buy these yourself. These are all listed on the PDF document, which is on the product description on the Made Me website. So going through the more difficult parts, you'll need some lost wax brass castings. These are from RT models, and these are the steps required. So you have a tender ladder, which will go on the back of the bunker here, and that is 4AGB025, which is one ladder, £2.75. And we also have a set of lost wax tender steps for a bullied. So we've got all the steps we require. We'll probably just need these two and these two here. And that code number is 4AGB0TS, and that's £3.75. And they'll do the underneath of the bunker print. So that's those ones. These are from Wizard models, as well as the wheels here. These are bullied, I think it's 3'6" bogie wheels. So you can buy them off Wizard. And this is the bogie they will be fitted onto. This is LS11, formerly of Comet models, but now being sold and distributed by Wizard. Quite a simple etch frame here, so you fold this up and solder on to the, or laminate the two sides onto this. So you need some soldering skills. You need a spring as well, if you found a spring somewhere, which will nicely balance it. You can find some possibly from Wizard as well, but it is quite hard to find the right spring, so I usually buy quite a few of them and see how it goes. So that's those. Wheels, of course, Wizard as well. Again, all the code numbers are on the PDF document on the description. And these, which I will need for the rear end of the bunker, which is Slater's plastic card, or Slater's stepped parallel buffer sets for LNER or Southern Railway locomotives. And these cost me about £12, I think, from the top of my head, and were purchased from 2K models, I think, and they arrive pretty quickly. So that's basically all you'll need, as well as the glues, the brass wire, 0.45mm brass wire. You may need a little bit of plastic or a little bit of brass if you want to make the little cover that goes over here, and that slides into the 2 slots at the top there. I think some very, very thin plastic might be alright, as long as you've got it in black already, then saves you painting it and making it thicker. So that being said, that's your parts, and then we will get on to getting the kit ready for construction. So as mentioned in the first part, what we'll need to do is clean off the prints. Obviously there's a bit of debris around from the supports, so you will need various tools, a needle file, and I usually use this fiberglass brush, and as I always say, please be careful, because the fibers in these, in your hands and in your fingers, are a complete pain. So use your needle file just to take off any burrs on the edge where the supports were. I can still see a few on there, and obviously down this edge here, because it needed quite a lot of support on this edge to stop it bowing in on itself. I have improved the support structure, and there's not too much on there because I've already done some work on this, but as you can see down the back, you can see it shining in the light, all the little dimples where the supports used to be, and just clean around those rivet heads as well. Just clean down the side. It also roughens it up slightly just so you can have a nice surface to paint onto, and I reckon satin black will be absolutely fine for this, from Halfords, and you can get that quite cheaply, either at a little £9 can or something like that. I think they do one at £7 as well, and that'd be fine. Now this doesn't need too much work, but it does need a little bit of preparation. So moving on with the bunker, you can see on the rear most of the items are now fitted in terms of lamp brackets, which is using some 0.85mm brass strip, which is quite difficult to find. I'm not quite sure where I bought it from. I think the closest you can get is about 1mm, but if anyone knows a place that you can get 0.85mm strip, be gratefully appreciated, because I can't actually remember where I bought this from. As you know, the buffers already, the holes already been opened out for those, as you've already seen, just showing you there. But of course there's one small job which still needs to be done, and that's to add some steps to this bunker. So for the steps, we have some lost wax brass castings, and these are the tender set from RT Models. The code and the part number is on the PDF. These need to be modified slightly, so we're going to be using these two here, which will go on the tender step here on either side, one on either side. And we have these two here either side, which will be used on the rear end just underneath here. You can see the 2 holes there and 2 holes there. So you need some cutters, and you'll need a needle file, and you'll need to cut off the top here to leave 2 protruding points to go into the holes. This will also need to be cut down and cleaned up with a file, and then they can be glued into place. However, I will not be gluing them until all the work is done underneath the actual bunker itself, like the bogie, etc. So I'll get on, clean them up, and show you fitting them, or dry fitting them as they were. So there we are, all the steps not attached but dry fitted to the holes on both sides. These will be glued in with Aerodite slightly later on, when it'll be spray painted black. You can see the rear there as well, all the items fitted and steps there as well. So the Q1 body has been removed from the chassis. There's going to be quite a lot of work on the chassis as well to do. Now, depending on which period you're going to go down in terms of southern or not southern, you can keep obviously the number plate on there if you wish. However, I might remove that and just turn it into a southern engine just for some cleaner lines. On the side here you can see, which I was talking about in the previous part, you've got the washout plugs and you've got all this detail here. Now you could take a needle file to that and just smooth it off, but what I would do is take your tank and place it on the side and see what you need to remove, like this little cylinder here. You need to remove so it comes down to that same height as the cab, and also that little line along the bottom as the cab. And I would also use some masking tape and just mask around the area that you want to remove the material so you don't go over it. I might de-weather this slightly so it looks a bit cleaner to look at, and there'll be some other work like removing this metal drag box plate on the underside, which I think is quite simple to do. In fact, it just pulls out, as you can see. Now you're probably going to ask as well, what about all the pipe work underneath? This will just pop out. It's also glued on the inside. If you run some I forgot what it's called now, it's not enamel thinners, it's the acetone, which will soften the super glue, and you can just ease a knife behind it and pull it off, and then you can remount this a little bit further out if you need, or just behind the tank itself. So that'd be quite nice to do, so you can save that, but you may have to be careful as well of all the wheels and bits and pieces so it doesn't get in the way. The only other thing you need to remove from here is really these sort of holders here for the full plate, so those need to be trimmed off with some snippers, some flush snippers, which we have here. So whilst that's cleaned up on both sides, all the detail removed on the section I need, then that would be pretty much ready to go and clean for basically additions. So after about 10 minutes I've removed all the pipe work, you can see there, nice and clean. I've got rid of the little dimples on the underneath where they push into, so that's nice and clean. Just need to finish it off a little bit more and remove the brackets from the full plate as well. Also what you've got to remove is, if I point it towards the camera, you can see on here this bit raises up slightly and then back down. On this one I've filed it across completely flat, or just snipped it off. So yeah, that should clean up reasonably nicely. So now you've got all the underside complete and the front smoothed off, and that's ready to go. Cleaned off the underside of the full plate as well. I've also smoothed off the front smoke box door so I can go back to southern days, and I've removed the smoke box door number plate moulding, and that just needs a little bit of cleaning up, and also some filler, and also the handrail reinstalling. On the body shell itself, the only thing I've got left to do is mark out where the tanks will go, and then I'll clean off the side in terms of detail, either with a file or maybe a Dremel if it's quicker. It's just trying to get rid of all of the raised detail and flatten it out a little bit. But at this point I would probably suggest you check your bunker after you've cleaned it up with your fiberglass brush, all the surface, and you can still see all the rivets are still there. You've still got a few little dimple marks from where the supports used to be, so you might need a little bit of filler, only slightly. So just to check it all lines up and fits, the raised section just underneath the cab there, and you can see that fits and is also at the right height with the roof, which is good. I'm just holding this, I haven't glued it or anything, as you can see. That would be a little bit later. If the roof slightly isn't in alignment, just dip it in some warm water and ease it out. Don't be too rough with it, and you can ease it back into shape without too much of a problem. So that's okay, and as you can see on the bunker here, I've started adding some bits like the handrail wire, because it's quite hard to find. So that goes sort of in between here, well, the centre and the outer edge of the bunker here. So you'll need to re-drill the holes, 0.45mm on this one, and there's no other handrails in the back here apart from the ladder that goes up here. You can see the 2 holes, and you just need a small pin vise drill for that, and measure what you've got, because all the castings are slightly different and you might need to do some cleaning up. Also, we've got the lamp brackets or root disc brackets. There's 3 along the bottom, 1 there and 1 there, and 1 at the top. I just either use some staples or some leftover brass strip and then bend it into shape. You can get some etches as well from Wizard, if that helps. So all of this has been cleaned up. Needs a little bit more work on the underside with a flat needle file there, just to straighten out the edge, because it's still a little bit rough from where the printing was. You can sort of see a wavy line down there. After that, of course, you need to put more brass handrails on. There's 1 here and 1 here, and you've also got a small lever here, which I'm not quite sure what that's for, but it's on the back of the tender on the Q1. And also you need a handbrake. Now you can order a handbrake from say Roxy Mouldings or even Wizard themselves. They do various castings, etc. And there's a small hole down there just for that. And then you can probably get ready to paint it in some Halford satin black. Going round to the back again, obviously the holes for the buffers, they do need easing out slightly with a round needle file, but they should easily fit after that. And just test fit this one. There we go, nicely done, and that fits nicely as well. As you can see, sprung as well, so keeps all the people on YouTube happy. The other things that I'm going to add as well is the moving side part here, which has also been nicked off the Q1 tender, and you can either transplant those over from the tender to this, or just use some very thin plastic. So that's pretty much done really. I'll continue cleaning up, and then we'll go on to the tank side of the parts to go onto the body shell. So on to the side tanks, which makes this ugly locomotive even worse. Not really an improvement. So we just need to sort of clean off the detail here. You can either do that with a flat needle file or a Dremel, if you've got a nice flat Dremel, just to go across the surface. Try not to take too much off. If there's a better solution, please comment below. But it's just to take off some raised detail, and it's just under the window line. But to help you, it's best to get your tank and use some masking tape. I've got this paint tape, just to sort of mask it up, but it's still masking tape, similar sort of thing. And I've just sort of marked out where I'm going to take off the detail. And once that's off completely, and if your tanks have bowed or bent slightly, again, hot water will straighten them out before fitting. And you can just see there with the tape, if I line that up with the sort of marking on the underside of the cab where it's slightly indented, and you can see there that all fits in there. Now you can glue that in with some araldite, which I have behind me, and you can see that lines up quite nicely. Then I can take that off, remove all of the detail, and then once that's straight and ready to go on, I can glue that onto the model using some small clamps. And you'll see me in the next section with all of the tanks on and ready to progress onto the next stage, which is probably gluing on the bunker section. So you can see here I'm just cleaning off the surface, same with the other side. I'm just using the side of a knife just to clean off any raised surfaces, and this just takes it off quite nicely along the rivet lines, the very small rivet lines along the body casing, and just the raised surface over the washout plugs and access hatches. You can see it doesn't look very pretty, but it never will do. This will clean up quite nicely. A little bit more scraping just to make sure everything is level and fine, and I'll just clean that off with a fiberglass brush or pen, and then what I'll do is prepare the tank. So once you cleared the surface of detail on the side of the locomotive, we can then go on to the tanks. Now these tanks do bend a little bit, so you may need to put them in some hot water and straighten them out. I have done so with these two and they are fine. It just bows sort of inwards on the filler part, so this part here, and just bows inwards, or outwards I should say, so it bends that way. And then all you have to do is put it in some hot water for a few minutes and then gently bend it back and let it cool down, which I've done with these two. Now these will need some cleaning up. You can see on the underside all the support material, or where the supports were. You just need a flat file, make sure that's all nice and flat, because when you add these to the locomotive body shell, there'll be some small little right angled supports that go underneath, so you want them to sit reasonably well on the underside of your tanks. It's only a very light file, so you don't need to go too mad on it. But on the other side as well, you can see there's still quite a lot, as this was sort of printed at a tilt, just to try and ease some of the warping. So you'll need to basically file down this area by quite a bit, I think, from what I can remember. So you just need to get a reasonable fit as well to the body shell, and also keep going back and checking and making sure it's still okay, and you can sort of see if it's in contact with all the right places. I still need to take a little bit off, or quite a bit off the thicker part here, so I'll get that done and then we can go back to fixing them in place. So once you have them cleaned off, I'll just clean these up with a bit of a damp paper towel. Once they've all been cleaned off and levelled on the back and cleaned, and on that end as well facing the cab, and it's ready to install onto the side here. Now you can see I've wrapped this up in masking tape to mark the position where it will sit. I'm going to use some 2-part araldite, and I'm going to clip that, glue that and clip it into place and clamp it into place just there, and wait for it to go off, which will take about 24 hours. So that'll be nice and solid and then ready to go. Once that's in place, then really it's down to the chassis and making some changes there. So here you can see the tanks have been glued on either side. There you go. So these have all been stuck on, cleaned up, and that's ready to be painted. So really that is all you need and can do with the body shell at the moment. Once removed, I can then move on to fixing the new bunker onto the actual body shell, so it becomes one item. But first I need to go on to the chassis. So at this stage it's probably best to sort of mention the chassis, because there's going to be some changes on this too. Quite heavy change, so if you haven't got the tools it's probably best you don't attempt this at all. But if you are wanting to build this tank properly, then you will need to do this, because everything will get in the way otherwise. So here we have our sorry looking Q1 chassis. I've tried to clean up some of the weathering, which is why it hasn't got any rods on. So moving to the rear end, now we have this sort of bracket and also the tender pickup, which I'm going to reuse, but I'm not going to use the actual phosphor bronze pickups on the drawbar. So I'm going to remove all that and take all the wiring off, and then I'm going to remove this brass metal bracket for the all the brake rigging going on to this section here. So that's going to come off as well. And then what you're going to have to do using your Dremel or a very big file is to take off some material from the back here to accommodate the actual new bogie on the rear, and you can see here, and you can actually use the sort of bunker modification to actually give you a guide. So we'll go into a little bit more detail on that in the next section. So I'm going to take the brake rigging off to make sure that's clear, and then I'll start work on the back end. So I need to take off the drawbar connector and also the connector that transmits the power from the tender. I'm going to unsolder those wires from there, which will then give me access. I've got a screw stuck in there. There we go. So that's that released. That needs to be unsoldered, and then the wires pulled up back through the chassis. Then we can look at taking this metal or etched metal piece which holds the brake rigging at the back. The other areas we need to take off, if I tilt this around the right way up, we need to take off this cylinder here and also this box here, which are later additions to the chassis. So if you've got a Southern model you might not have it. And on this side we need to remove this extra piece coming out from the side of the chassis. That needs to be taken off as well, and then we can start working on putting the arch of the wheel into this area here, which we'll be using a Dremel. Off safely, which will go into my spares box. It's time to get the etched metal fold up piece which holds all the brake rigging at the back to be removed. The best way I found to do this, it's got two pins, metal pins, one at the front, one at the back, and it's probably best just to sort of Dremel off the top, which is sort of bowled over, just to sort of keep that piece in place. Once you have Dremeled it off, get a flat bladed screwdriver and just put it underneath and rotate it off. Hopefully it will pop off, but it's still going to be extremely tight. There we go. Just Dremel off a little bit more for the top, and that's been released. So that now leaves this area clear to be modified for the wheel, which will be in this area when the bogie is constructed. While we're on this area, we'll need to remove the plastic here, maybe a little bit of this area as well underneath. On this side, as I say, just need to remove this extension out from the side of the chassis where I think this piece of plastic used to fit in. So you can see here the chassis has been basically covered, so none of the metal filings can get into any places I don't want them to. I've partially disassembled the chassis and taken out the rear wheel set here, as I usually find that if you don't touch the chassis too much, then it should still run reasonably well when you put it back together, as long as you don't sort of mess around with it too much. So I've covered over the chassis as it is, so motor and internals are all protected. So paper towel and some masking tape. I've already trimmed off the section that comes out from the side of the chassis, which I think is where some of the pipe work went, and I've also trimmed off some on this side as well, which hangs down from underneath. Now you can also see in yellow pen I have sort of loosely marked out where the curve will begin, and I'll be using a sort of Dremel sanding bit, and that will go nicely and follow the curve of the underneath of the actual bunker part, which will fit onto the body shell in a little bit. So need a reasonably good strong Dremel and your sanding drum bit, and we'll be trying to cut that nicely and slowly and reasonably easily, not to put too much pressure onto the bit itself so you don't wreck it. So I'll get on with that now, and that should take a few minutes. So you can see here we have now sanded away quite a bit of the back end of the chassis, leaving a nice curve on the underside. What I'll now do, while it's all still covered, is I'll spray this black to match the under frame, so maybe some matte black I think I'll go for. Just cover that over. Then I'll take the wrappings off, the protector wrappings, then clean it up, and then we'll start putting the body shell together, make sure it all fits, and carry on from there. So moving on with the bunker, you can see on the rear most of the items are now fitted in terms of lamp brackets, which is using some 0.85mm brass strip, which is quite difficult to find. I'm not quite sure where I bought it from. I think the closest you can get is about 1mm, but if anyone knows a place that you can get 0.85mm strip, be gratefully appreciated, because I can't actually remember where I bought this from. As you know, the buffers already, the holes already been opened out for those, as you've already seen, just showing you there. But of course there's one small job which still needs to be done, and that's to add some steps to this bunker. So for the steps we have some lost wax brass castings, and these are the tender set from RT Models. The code and the part number is on the PDF. These need to be modified slightly, so we're going to be using these two here, which will go on the tender step here on either side, one on either side. And we have these two here either side, which will be used on the rear end just underneath here. You see the two holes there and two holes there. So you need some cutters, and you'll need a needle file, and you'll need to cut off the top here to leave two protruding points to go into the holes. This will also need to be cut down and cleaned up with a file, and then they can be glued into place. However, I will not be gluing them until all the work is done underneath the actual bunker itself, like the bogie, etc. So I'll get on, clean them up and show you fitting them, or dry fitting them as they were. So after all the cutting, filing and dremeling on the back end of the chassis, you can see now it matches with the wheel splasher arches on the underside of the extension of the body shell, with the bunker included. And what I'll be doing now is basically trying to fit the bogie which goes underneath here. Now this area has changed since my original one. I've actually raised it so the spring actually has some compression and also makes the bolt shorter, so there's not so much movement. I'll also be putting some pickups on the bogie, so the wires will go from the bogie through the base, under here, through the hole and back through. There's quite enough room, or there is enough room to fit a 2-pin plug, so it interacts with the bogie and the actual main chassis. So that's what I'll be going on to next and showing you, which is basically the installation of the bogie, which I purchased from Wizard, which they bought the stock from Comet. So let's get into that. I won't show you the soldering because it's long and laborious, and there's a bit of lamination as well in terms of soldering on the detail onto the sides of the bogie. So this is the Comet bogie, ordered from Wizard. You can see the swing link here, which we won't be needing. This is the main bogie itself, and this is the two coverings to make it a southern bogie. This is the LNER covers which go over the sides of the bogie, and these are basically the parts where you bolt to, and you can see that will go into the centre of the actual bunker itself on the underside. I'm going to leave the two holes so I can thread two wires through, so I can put some pickups on the bogie, which work quite well on the other one I've done. So what I'm going to do is remove the sections we need, this and this, and then I will start putting it together, and I will show you along the way certain areas and sections. You will need a soldering iron. I have a 30-watt Antex soldering iron. You'll need some flux. You'll probably need some 145 degree and also some 188 degree solder. It's getting quite hard to find solder these days, but I bought mine from Hobby Holidays, I think, off the top of my head. So I'll get on with this and show you how to put it together. So you can see in front of us here on the cutting mat, we have the wheels at the back, have the two overlays for the southern bogie pattern, and we have the bogie itself just here, which has just been started to be folded up in the centre, and these two sides will be folded in on themselves and soldered to the middle section, and then these overlays soldered on top of the outside. In the background you can see the nut and the washer underneath. I will solder these together, and this is the top parts which holds the bogie boss, I guess it's probably called. This is the top part which has already been folded up, with the screw in the back ready to be soldered into place, and then wires added, etc. So that being shown, I will now go on to soldering it all together and show you the finished item. So as you have just seen on the previous part, I have now soldered the bogie together, and with a small bit of alteration on the sort of horseshoes over the axles, which I've just opened up slightly with a needle file, a round one, that now rolls nice and freely. I've also bent out the guard irons on the end, and you can see the bogie boss in the background. This hasn't been glued in yet, it still needs to be wired, pickups added, etc. I've also got some 2-pin plugs here, which I bought from, I think it's Kites Lights, back in May, which are always quite useful for sort of connecting bits and pieces backwards and forwards. Only £3.65 for a set of 5. So they're an Isle of Wight company, so best to support local business. But as I mentioned earlier on this video, there needs to be an NEM pocket on the bogie itself here. And I completely forgotten the company name I get them from. So these are the brass rigid NEM pockets 362. These come from MJT, or Dart Castings, so 2580 part number. Occasionally they're out of stock, they come with a good manual, and they come in pairs, as you can see. They need a little bit of assembly, soldering, folding, and then marking out. Now you can just about see on this one, possibly on the camera, from the back, or the front I should say, front of the NEM pocket back to the mounting, which sort of lines up with the front of the middle section. So if it's upside down, you'll see it like that. Then you need to put a hole in the centre, which the actual bolt can slide left or right, and this will be soldered onto the top of the bogie that way round, with the NEM pocket facing downwards and all the other bits folded upwards, and that works quite well on the other one. So distance from here to the line is 17.5 millimeters. So just add that to your notes. I'll also add it onto the PDF. So I'm going to solder that up together, fix it in place, and then that will be basically ready to go. All I need to do is add some pickups using some copper clad board. This will be glued on the inside of the bogie, and then the pickup phosphor bronze strip will be soldered to that and then folded over, probably after I've wired it in, just so I can avoid the paint. So that's all done, that's ready to go. Quite simple. That's probably going to take me a few hours to do that. It's taking me an hour to assemble the bogie, and then I'll be on to the electrics and fitting out stage. And then once that's done, all the items can be glued onto here, and then the bunker can then be added to the body shell, which is exciting. So as you can see, we have the two sections in front of us now, and this has had a light coat of paint, mainly to paint the front or the back, or whatever you want to call it, of the bunker. You can see I've added the handbrake there, which I have 3D printed, and now your kits will have a handbrake pre-made for it, which will be in the kit as well, just to save you some money and to help, because none of the ones that I purchased were the right height or type. So all this has been painted lightly, and I might go over it with some matte black just to tone it down a little bit. It still needs properly painting, as you can see on the back. The buffer beam needs painting red, etc., and the underneath needs finishing off. Bogey's been completed, as you've already seen, and that's now got the 2 wires and pin plug done for it on the Loco and on the Bogie. So really now what we're left with is to glue these two together, but before I do, I will mention about the tanks on this, because I've changed the design slightly, and you can see on this I've added a ledge, which means when you put it towards the side of the body shell, it will self-level along the underside of the body shell, so it will be at the right height. It may need a little bit of filing just to bring down the top a bit from all the printing and all that kind of thing, and just a little bit off this leading edge here, but it's a bit of an easier idea and an easier design for you to fit as well. So that's been changed. Onto this section now, you need to glue the body shell to the bunker, and it's always best to sort of try and line it up first, so go for a dry test run and make sure the whole thing lines up okay. I find it sort of best to sort of line up the top first, and then there you go, and then glue the rest on. So I might tack it into place and then glue it together like so. I've left this part unpainted just in front, which is raised so it fits underneath the shell here. So I can put some aerolite on that, a little bit on the top. You don't want too much oozing out all over the place, and then that'll be left probably taped together, because it's a bit difficult to get a clamp in there, and then we'll see how we get on. So we'll go on to that stage next, and then I can paint the whole thing with a lovely rattle can from Halford's Satin Black. So here we are, everything is now glued into one piece here. So the body shell and the bunker is now glued together. It's not fixed to the chassis just yet, it'll come a little bit later. So really now the body shell, the stage it's on now, it requires painting as well as the other components underneath, so we can start assembling the model and putting it back together. So I won't really go into the painting side because it's quite boring and laborious, a bit like this video really, which is now probably over an hour long. So I'm going to paint the model with satin black spray paint from Halford's, nice and simple, and I'm going to do the buffer beam as well, paint it red like the front. I'm going to spray paint that as well with some toolbox red, and then I can sort of go over it with a different shade of red, or we can highlight it up a little bit in terms of weathering, etc. As you can see, it's not all in one piece. The bogie isn't fixed to anything yet, that will come a little bit later. On the back end here, I'll need to mask off the buffer beam as I go around with the black paint. I've put in some Q-tip rods, as it were, the bits that hold the cotton bud bits, on the end. I'll cut them off and put them in the buffer housings, which keeps the paint out, keeps them clean. As you saw before, all of it's now glued in, and that is fine, ready to go. So on to painting, and then we'll come back and you can see it all being reassembled. Okay, you join me back on the bench. Everything has been painted and cleaned up and started to have a few things refitted. If I turn the model over, this isn't actually all screwed together yet, but you can have a look. I fixed the Bogie boss there, and you can see the Bogie here beneath being assembled, and you can see the pickups have been fitted using some phosphor bronze strip. There's two pieces usually I buy of these, code PB1M, that's from Precision Metals Albion Alloys, and then these are soldered onto the bronze clad board, or copper clad board, stuck to the inside of the Bogie with the phosphor bronze soldered on, flipped over and making contact with the wheel, as you can see. And that works pretty well on the other one. And all I need to do is put the wheel on, and then that's finished. And then that needs to be reattached to the chassis with a spring. Rods have been painted, so they're ready to go back on. But the other thing we need to talk about, because I haven't actually covered it so much, is the tank supports, which you can just see here, and we'll go into those in just a second. So close up on the area of the underside of the tanks here, you can see the two supports added there, and these have been glued onto the chassis. Now what you need to do is you'll need either a Dremel or a sharp knife, or something just to take away the rivets on the side. Let's flip this over. You can see on the side here I've removed the rivets on the side. It's not so much on this side, so that's not too bad. Now you've got two supports for each side. Some have got the larger pad, you can see there, which is slightly taller, and you can see here, if I can hold it, you can see a slightly smaller pad on the underside of this one. This one's the front, this one's the back, and these will be glued on, but you can sort of line them up. You may need to file it slightly to just take off a corner to get around the sandboxes, as it were. There you go, sort of rest in that position. And also what you'll need to do, because I made these top pads on the supports a bit too long, I didn't quite know where they will end, so I've trimmed it back slightly to where the angle meets or ends on the underside of the pad, and just filed it off, and that comes into line with the recessed part of the tank. I'm just going to clean these up. These are painted matte black. One will be put there, and the front one will be put just here next to the sandbox, just there. So you join me on the upside down Q1-Tank engine, still not screwed into position, but it will do. All the motion is now in position and in place and screwed and fixed in place. And now we sort of focus on the the attachment of the bogie, which completes the chassis really. So you can see the boss is glued in place now. That's all in where it needs to be. And you can see the two wires for the pickups, which I need to put in and solder in position. But really we're talking about now how to balance it and get the right spring for this. So really you can see the upside down of it if I take the washer off and I'll zoom in. So looking at the central boss close up, you can see we have a spring there which I purchased a long time ago from Eileen's Emporium. Unfortunately no longer with us, so I'm still trying to find bits and pieces which I used to buy from them from other sources, which is proving to be quite difficult. This is the spring I use, 4mm by 3mm. It's a compression spring, little steel spring. And what I've also added onto this is an M2 brass washer, which I'll fit onto there. That just gives it a little bit more surface area to balance out. And then your bogie will go on top of there and spring quite nicely, and you also have the nut and washer we soldered together a little bit earlier on, and that is all ready to go. All I need to do now is solder on the wires, and then we should have a working chassis. Now the plug for all of this is actually stuck onto the side of the motor, so not in this section here. The wires are directed up through the side and along the motor side, which seems to work okay. So I'm going to just finish that off, add the wires, and tidy it all up, fix it in place, dab a glue on that, stop it coming undone, and it's ready for really transfers and some test runs. So one last job on the body shell, because I completely glossed over it and forgot about it. Obviously we have the slide inside here, which I originally sort of thought about carrying it across from the Q1 tender, as I have it on that, which hides the water inlets or caps as it were. So I've made this out of some brass sheet or strip, which you can see here. This is from K&S Metals, and you can buy it from a good model shop. So this is about 6.35 millimeters wide and about 0.4 of a mil thick. Now I do measure it in inches, so if you can find one measured in millimeters, that'd be great. Then I won't have to convert it. So you just need a few tools, a drill to add a little handle to open it, and a few tools to shape it and bend it as it were. I have these sort of round pliers just to shape it and ease it over. So you need to cut off a section. This is the right width, so that's not a problem. And then the length, I cut it to about 14 mil, just under 14 millimeters. But go for 14, then you can shape it how you like. I create a small notch in the bottom, so it sort of makes the cap opening the same each side as it were. And yeah, that's pretty straightforward to do, pretty easy to do. It took me about 30 minutes to do that. Anyway, we'll make another one. So following on from the brass sliders on the cab, you can now see these have been chemically blackened and also painted. I use birch wood brass black metal finish. You basically clean the brass with a fiberglass brush, put it in a small pot of fluid, let it go black, dry off with a paper towel, and then once it's fully dry, then paint it. I use just a satin black rattle can just to do that, and then that's ready to be fitted. As you can also see, we've now fitted the transfers. This is using sheet number 10 of HMRS press fix transfers. This is the green backed ones, or green shaded ones. Just to sort of touch on a small point, numbering system, Bullies numbering system. it was adapted later on. I had a comment saying my numbering was wrong on the other kit that I built, but the numbering system was adapted later on. So for the sort of West Countries and the light Pacifics, as it were, these had the numbers for the axles leading and trailing, so the 1 and the 2, before the C, whereas the merchant navies had the 1C2 arrangement with the C, meaning the coupled wheels, in the middle. And this was adapted so the 2 and the 1 were first, or 1 and the 2 were first, can't quite remember off the top of my head, and then the number followed on after the C, which was the adaptation a bit later on, which is why there's 2 slightly different numbering systems. So hopefully that answers the guy's question, who commented on the original video, which had quite a good number and success rate. A few people didn't like it, which is understandable. We all have acquired tastes. But apart from that, you can also see the pipe work has been fitted on this side. This unpins from the underside from this brass rod here, so you can pull that down and pull that out and lift off the body shell, which works reasonably well. Hopefully you won't be able to get inside it, or won't need to, because they're quite reliable models. So everything's been done and reconnected. The coupling rods on the wheels here have been painted oily silver, or oily steel I should say, with a brush that come out quite nicely. All the underframe's been done in a matte black, the smoke box and the roof matte black as well, just with a brush, and all the pipes and things on the front have been refitted as well. And basically it's ready to go. So without further ado, I'll just round up and basically say this kit is available from the Made Me shop, and you can find that through my Facebook page. And there are 2 kits available, the A version, which this one is with the cutaway on the back, or you can have the other version which has the tunnels, as it were, coming from the side window coming out, which is sort of a copy from the Q1 tender engine. And those will be available for around about £35 in January, and they should be sort of 2 to 3 weeks printing. So if you order, they'll be showing it in stock, but it'll take 2 to 3 weeks to print, get them ready and shipped out to you. That's how I'm working this at the moment, because that seems to work quite well and people do understand, which is fine by me. So without further ado, let's get on and show you it running, and that really concludes this instruction video. So thank you for watching, and hopefully you'll be interested in one of these. If not, thanks for watching anyway, and hope everyone has a good new year in 2024.